So I'm Megan, for those of you who weren't here last night. I'm the director of the festival. Last night you heard a bunch of shout outs and a bunch of spiels about what the festival supports. Long story short, the festival supports One Book, One New Orleans. We are a festival with a purpose. The purpose is that those of us who love the written word and know how valuable it is, gather, and any proceeds that are raised go right back into the community, providing literacy resources for those who normally wouldn't be able to access them. So thank you all for being here. But if you're walking around and you see little signs that say support the festival and the year-round work, that's the year-round work. And one of the things that we're really excited to do right this year, it's a brand new initiative, is partner with the Orleans Parish Jail. We're building them a library month by month. And also we are starting a quarterly author series. It's been going on for the past year. It's been incredibly popular. They're actually asking us to expand to bi-monthly because so many folks have requested to be part of it. So thank you all for being here and for supporting that mission and that work. Before we get into some thank yous, I do want to remind you all that those of you who purchased tickets, thank you for that, were automatically entered to win a $25 Community Book Center gift card. So we're gonna do that real quick. I drew this morning. Where's Kelly Hand? Kelly Hand, come get your gift card, babe. We're gonna do two because I'm feeling the love today. The other one goes to Brad Richard. Buy books, Brad. Speaking of buying books, the authors that are presenting today will be available for signings here after their session, and you can get their books here from the lovely Candace with Tubby & Coo's Traveling Bookshop. All right, so one last shout out, and that is to our people holding it down. We've got Nate over here on the sound. Thank you, Nate. If this microphone works, that's all his work. And if you're watching this slideshow, that's him too. We got Sean on videography. Thank you, Sean. Videographer, mastermind behind Litwire in New Orleans, and a very talented poet. And thank you to the lovely Nikki and the lovely Tracy, who have volunteered for multiple shifts. Thank y'all for helping me. So if you see Tracy running around, she's volunteer paparazzi today. Thank you, Tracy. Okay, we're gonna get into it. This session is called Beyond the Bars. It is about books dealing with life after incarceration. And that's all I'm gonna say because I'll let them tell it better than I do. Our moderator for today is Syrita Steib. Syrita is recognized nationally for her work on dismantling the legal system and removing barriers for women and girls impacted by incarceration while transitioning back into the community. She serves on numerous local and national boards and appears regularly as a keynote speaker and panelist on topics of incarceration and injustice. Syrita was one of 73 people granted a full and unconditional presidential pardon in January 2021. In 2022, Syrita ran for U.S. Senate in Louisiana and placed 4th among 13 candidates. Let's give it up for Syrita. She's going to introduce the rest of the people.
Thank y'all so much for having me. This is a new experience being a moderator. Normally I'm sitting down talking, so if I'm talking too much, I'm going to ask my panelists to hold me accountable so they can talk. I'm going to start with introducing Kirsty. Kirsty is a former incarcerated woman, the author of Perfectly Flawed. Kirsty, you can come up. Kirsty has worked on legislation in Oregon on Ban the Box. That is how I initially met Kirsty. We did Ban the Box on college applications here in Louisiana, and Kirsty was an advocate on the ground that we connected with, and she passed the same or similar legislation in the state of Oregon. And then she moved down to come to Louisiana and work with us here on criminal legal system work. So we're excited to have Kirsty as a new part of the community and looking forward to talking to you a little bit more about Perfectly Flawed. Yeah. Bree Anderson. Bree is also an author. The name of Bree's book is in my own words. Bree also started and co-founded an organization here in Louisiana, is how I initially met Bree, focusing on girls who had incarcerated fathers. She has now transitioned into opening her own foundation due to her experience with having a premature child and having to be in the NICU. So the foundation is called Simon's Heartbeat. Yes. And that is in remembrance of the twin that is no longer here with us physically, but still here with us in spirit today. So we I look forward to hearing and getting into more about your own words as well. Yes. And last but not least, the person who's bringing our panel up to the end, the only male that's allowed to sit up there with us today, Mr. Andre. Andre is also an author. The name of his book is My Emancipation from Incarceration. Andre is also formerly incarcerated and also the father of a son named Syrita and Bree's fiance. So they actually are doing this work together. Y'all married yet? Almost? Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was giving the correct title. Her fiance and they are actually taking this journey and walking this life in life after incarceration together. So I'm excited to be in conversation with you guys today. Can y'all please give the panelists a little round of applause? And the deeper bios are in the programs if y'all wanted to read just a little bit more about that. But I guess I'll get started. Christy, how did you even get to the point of deciding that you wanted to write the book?
Hi, thank you so much. I think because when I ended up being incarcerated, I was so surprised that I ended up there, from having a great family and opportunity, and here I am incarcerated in a maximum security prison in Texas. And so I started to write. I saw a thing about the morning pages, which would be Cameron, and it said you write 3 pages every morning to just kind of dump what's inside. And for some reason it resonated with me, so I started doing that. And a lot of interesting stuff came out, which made me get to know myself a little bit more.
Yeah, Bree, I want to ask you the same question. How did you get to the point of knowing that you wanted to take your experiences and, publish them?
For me, I've always wanted to write a book, but it took me a really long time to really put my words and my thoughts and feelings on paper. I wasn't incarcerated, but I'm directly impacted by incarceration, through my father's incarceration. And when I was writing the title of my book, I think I scratched it out maybe 5 or 10 times. I kept saying, it's not the title of the book. I don't know what I want to name it. I started writing the book and I didn't have the name for the book. And so through my experience, like you say, hey, Syrita. Working in a space, with an organization that I was working at and co-founded, I learned a lot working with people who was formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated, and other children who were directly impacted by their parents' incarceration. And so at that point, my father was already released from prison after serving 23.5 years for crimes he didn't commit. And so having to relive those experiences through other people, not really relive it through them, but being able to share my lived experience and see what they was experiencing when I was 15 and 16 years old. So I said, you know what, I'm ready to write my book, and I just started writing, and I didn't have a title for it. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna name it in my own words, because growing up and hearing from the kids' lived experience in the school, in their neighborhoods, in their homes, they can't say what they want to say. Everybody always correct me and say, well, you shouldn't say it that way. That's not appropriate. That's not professional. So I said, you know what, my book gonna be called In My Own Words, so I can teach young people and teach people in general how to embrace barriers. And I'm going too deep in it, but that's why I started the book.
Andre, I want to start with you with the same question. How did you know that you were ready to take your experiences and put them on people?
I mean, honestly, I didn't. A lot of people were like, you should write a book. And, people just throw that out there a lot of times, especially when they know you're going through certain experiences. man, like, you should write a book. And I'm like, how do I know that it's even book worthy, you know? As a person that does read books, but I wouldn't call myself an avid book reader, I wanted to make sure that if I was to write a book, that I'd want to read it, you know, and that it wouldn't be, you know, so long and drawn out. I wanted to make sure that I was getting to the point. And, you know, as I was going through the course of my career and everything, I realized that a lot of the things that I've done had to do around like just reentry in itself, and I wanted to make sure that I had to, I actually expressed about like a discharge planning type thing. And you know, lo and behold, it kind of just came together. I mean, Bree was pregnant at the time. I woke up at 3 in the morning, like, babe, I got it. And I just jumped in my phone and started outlining it and just kind of went from there. I named it My Emancipation from Incarceration because a lot of people associate incarceration with just the physical aspects, when in fact we have probably more people mentally incarcerated than physically incarcerated out there. So I just kind of wanted to drive that home.
So Kirsty, I'm gonna come back to you. I know before you started actually doing the work and getting back into reentry and helping individuals, you often talk about the process of your own reentry and how it's continuous today. So can you just give us a little bit about how did you even get to a place to start working and helping others? And then understanding that you needed to write that out and not just give people like your physical presence, but something that they can hold on to for a lifetime. But just give us a little bit more about your specific reentry and how you knew you wanted to start doing the work.
Well, when I first got out, I thought I was not going to tell anybody. I was going to relocate. I'm from California, and I relocated to Oregon, and I thought, you know, I'll be in a new city. You still have so much guilt and shame. No one needs to know. I'll start off brand new. And little by little, there would be situations where I would tell someone little something, and their response was so different than I thought. They would tell me kind of some things about themselves that they don't tell other people. They would just be more interested and also very loving and supportive, which I thought, wow, I like that, you know, it's kind of nice. And so I just kept sharing a little bit more each time, and then I realized each time I did that, it made me more free. And it made me, it kind of released a lot of shame and guilt and empowered me. So then the more I did that, the more no one could really use any of my flaws really against me, because I started to become out there with it. And in a way that was empowering, but I also believe that a lot of amazing people were placed in my life to empower me. Like, I would listen to them say these great things about myself, and I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna trust you. I don't really see that yet, but I'm gonna believe you. And so what that had done is made me be that person for others. Like, I love being that person that says, you know, looks at all the potential, all the things that they maybe not even thought about for themselves, and say, hey, whatever you want to do, let's do that. And so now I realize that I can be that for others, and so those that are still incarcerated in reentry, I just want to provide a platform large enough and high enough and wide enough for them to reach to however they want to go to get to, you know, what's going to make them happy and free inside, and use their own words, like you said, not what's appropriate or not what their family thinks or society thinks. Like, what do you want to do in your own words?
So Bree, I have kind of like a two-part question for you. First, I know I would like you to give the audience just a little background on. We often talk about the people who are incarcerated and the tremendous effects and impacts that it has on the individual that's incarcerated. But we all know that families who do stick together or continue to support their incarcerated loved one also experience a lot, especially daughters and girls of parents who have been incarcerated. So first, I want you to just share what was it like for you as the child of an incarcerated father, and then I'll have a follow-up.
Okay. First, I acknowledge that my family is here. My mom and my dad, my auntie, sitting in the back. I know I showed my dad 13 and a half years, so I just want to acknowledge that they was in the room. So first, I'll start by saying that growing up as a child of an incarcerated parent, it was very traumatic. That's an experience no one wants to have, especially when you find out as an adult that your father was wrongfully convicted for 23 and a half years. So I met my father for the first time behind bars because I wasn't born yet when he went away to prison. And I know that's not a lot of y'all experience in the room, and you can't imagine what that feels like, but I think not only until I started meeting other people who had the same lived experience, some young girls that I mentored, and they started sharing their experiences. And honestly, they started reminding me of stuff that I used to feel or think about that I probably used to hide and, you know, in the back of my mind, because you don't really want to accept the fact that you might grow up your entire life without a father, right? So it was really traumatic, and it was hard, and I think because of my experience, it drove me into a space where I feel like I had to do something. And I took that anger and that pain into action, and I started working with children of incarcerated parents and helping them to know like that's not your story. That's just a part of your story. It's not who you are. It doesn't define you, and you can be someone. And I think throughout my entire life, I've always been a magnet. Like everybody who meet me, every single person that meet me, cling to me. They want to be free friend. They want to, you know, every single person. So I've always battled that because it was always a good thing. But it's like I got to spread my time around so much because everybody wants a part of Bree, and I think it's because I'm genuine. I come off shy to most people, but it's not, I mean, that's just a part of my lived experience. When you go through so much, especially from birth all the way up until adolescent, and then you adult, you go through so many experiences. Like, what else can I be? I mean, I could be belligerent, I could be fighting, I could be cursing people out, but I just took that energy and I turned it into something positive, and always kept a smile on my face and made sure I made other people smile. It was really difficult though, especially knowing now that I'm 30 years old and that my mother had to work and do all of these things by herself for 20 plus years for something that he didn't even do. So it's really sad, but because those things happen within the system, I'm making sure that I'm being a part of the problem, making sure I'm being a part of the solution to the problem that existed for several years, even before my existence, by working with some of the same people, you know, that played a role in a lot of people's cases when they should have been in prison. So I'm doing work now currently in a reproductive justice space, in the intersection of social justice and mass incarceration, because all of those things intersect, and it leaves children behind who have parents in prison, parents in prison who have children that's home. So I'm making sure I'm showing up in those spaces. And like I say, being my authentic self, because you meet a lot of people in spaces where your stories can be exploited, and it doesn't make kids want to connect with you. And I think because I share my story, and not to share my story to make them agree with me, but just show them this is who I am, and look what happens when you stick together and work with people in the community. You get families back together. I mean, it happens. I never thought I'd be sitting in the same room with both of my parents at this age, so I'm just so excited to be able to be doing this work alongside with my entire family, always, you know, by my side.
So the quick follow-up that I have that I think that people don't necessarily talk about is like the intentionality of the family structure not being able to be kept intact while a person in your family is incarcerated. So I just wanted you to lift up a specific thing, one thing that you can think of that was the most instrumental in trying to destroy you all's family unit. But how did you overcome that particular thing? Because I think what we don't talk about sometimes is the ways in which systems are not predicated on even maintaining a family structure.
Exactly. I would say the first thing was learning that my daddy had, what, two life sentences in how many years? I can't remember now. I don't know. Huh?
One life sentence in 237 years.
Oh, one life sentence in 237 years. That's the first thing that destroyed our family. And then the phone calls. The phone calls was only, 15 minutes? But within those 15 minutes, you get the same lady jump on every few minutes and say, you have 5 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. you have a collect call. It's like all of those seconds really matter when you're trying to communicate with your family on the inside, especially your father. You have all of these things you want to talk to him about, and then I might not talk to him for the next few weeks or months. It just depends, because back then everything was so much different. It was so much expensive. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy access. They didn't have a lot of organizations that we knew about, Operation Restoration, and the Food, and the Freedom Foundation, and all organizations that I know now exist to help formerly incarcerated people on the inside, and the children impacted by it. But those phone calls could have made or broke us, because it was difficult to talk to my dad on the phone sometimes. And when JPay came, even that was good for me, because I used to write so many letters, and I used to forget to send them. And I used to feel so bad. I'm like, dang, I wrote a letter to my daddy, but I never sent it. But I think making sure that my mama, thanking my mama for keeping that connection between me and my father, like that played a major role too, because everybody maintain that relationship, not because they don't want to, but they probably wasn't in a relationship before the parent went away to prison. So because my mom made sure that we kept that bond and that parental connection, that played a major role, because the phone calls were too expensive. And sometimes you get one call a month. Or just say, for instance, my birthday is on Christmas, and if I get a letter from my daddy weeks before or a card in the mail, I have to hold it until Christmas Day, just so I can make myself feel like I just got the card or I just got the letter in the mail. So those things really matter. So organizations that exist to support these families, I hold near and dear to my heart, because that didn't exist when I was growing up. It's just like you kind of got it how you live, or you talk. And I used to, go by my dad's side of the family, and they probably just got off the phone with him, and I'm just getting over that. So now I gotta wait till he may call back, or I'll talk to him again. So those phone calls was a thing to really keep people connected, because you couldn't really go visit as frequently as people able to now.
Thank you for that. Andre, how old were you when you were incarcerated?
I was 19.
Until?
19 until 22.
So tell me, I went to prison at 19 as well, and I know that is a very integral time in like your development and in life. So tell me what it was or how it was going into prison as a 19-year-old.
I think for me, because I was heavily gang involved as well in New York, it was kind of like no man's land. You hear all of these different things and different experiences and all the other things, but I assumed that I would be in there fighting, gang banging, and all other stuff. And when I got there, I realized that probably the only real opposition that I had in there were the officers. A lot of them felt like I was 19 years old, and so they may have children my age, and I'm going to correct you myself if they feel like nobody's correcting you. So, they pick at the younger dudes. They say different things. They look for us. They try to exploit our lack of emotional intelligence. They try to, manipulate you and put you in a position to even get worse time. And I think that was tough for me, because even though I was in that lifestyle, I always thought differently. And so I was aware of the gangs, but I also was aware of the situation in itself, to where you can't be looked at a certain way, otherwise it's free game. So it kind of puts you in a position to really make some tough decisions. And a lot of those decisions kind of impacted me outside afterwards, because then it was like, let me just avoid, but you carry those things with you when you leave. So then you avoid certain things and nothing gets done. But that was really the toughest part for me, was looking at this individual that I know for sure wouldn't even say anything twice to me out on the street. And they're like talking reckless nonstop, 24/7, doing different things. Even when you go into the box and they're supposed to slide your food on the tray and wait for you to come, they just open it and push it and throw the food on the floor. Things like that. I've been in the box, and they had an officer that would come on and say, if you don't bark like a dog, I won't feed you. So these are realistic things that transpire behind those walls. And if you're like me, and especially I've always been one to have that kind of like malcontent mind frame, and it really put me in a position being in there. So that was, like I said, that was the toughest part.
So just for frame of reference, when you say in the box, we're talking about solitary
Confinement.
confinement and the use. One of the big things is that I did, I think, a year in solitary confinement total, straight through. And I was 20 to 21, or 21 to 22, somewhere early on. But there's been a big push around the country about the use of solitary confinement and using it on children that are a young age, or using it on people suffering from mental health conditions or pregnant people. So just tell me a little bit about your experience with solitary, and then tie it into its development, I guess, at that time. And then also adding in, do you feel like any of your experience in prison was rehabilitated?
So my experience in solitary, I was like off and on because I knew how to play the game to get out. But it was exactly what people think, except a lot of the times when people are expressing solitary confinement, like for me especially, it triggers you. So you try to shut out like the worst of the worst and just think about some of the bad parts. But just overall, just think about just sitting in a room. And I was on Rikers Island, and it was like super, super cold. And they don't have mattresses on the beds like they usually do, so they'll throw you a little sheet. So you're sleeping pretty much on like a cookie pan, you know, and you're just laying there, and it's cold, and everybody's like screaming nonstop. And you know, like you said, there's so many different mental health issues. I knew individuals that were put in there that clearly had mental health issues that were governed by these standards of an individual that was just incarcerated, which isn't right, you know. And so for me, it really just kind of was like, I gotta get out of here for the sake of the fact that I am a people's person as well. So imagine just being that individual where people are coming to you, or you just talking, having a nice conversation, being a little ruined, and they're like, you know what, you're gonna be in here for 23 hours. And that's if you're lucky. I've been to places where I wasn't even in the box, I was just in reception, and we was only allowed to shower 3 times for the week. You know, so these are the things that go on through the course of that. Imagine being in a cell that's 112 degrees in the summertime, and you can only shower 3 times a week. The shower is automated, and it's supposed to be set for 7 minutes, which I highly doubt. You have water that is, if you want to call it lukewarm, you can be nice, but it's cold, you know, and that still carries with me to this day. Bree will tell you, I don't like the cold, I don't like cold weather, I don't like cold water bothers me. You know, so it's just like those things, and just thinking about that, going through reception, and they were like, you have to kind of get like when I went through reception in downstate, they strip you naked, and you're on a line with like another 70 individuals naked behind each other, and they have this box kind of like this stage, and the water is like this high in there, and there's a shower in the middle of it. And they give you this lice thing to put in your hair and tell you to step into that dirty water that you can see stuff floating in, to hold on to the shower so you can wash your hair, you know, and things of that nature. And, you know, just the overall, if you don't have the haircut that they think is low enough, then they have a person out there that's literally going to shave you down and all of this other stuff. So a lot of it was the mental games, but I was hip to the mental games having the family that I had around just different things that have transpired in this country. But yeah, that was like one of the toughest situations for me. And some of those things, you know, that it just carries with you. And just being in prison in general, I had to get used to just being around people and sleeping around people who were not that worried, you know. And Bree would tell you, in the beginning, sometimes she would touch me while I was sleeping. I'm like, oh, you know. But these are the things that are long-lasting impacts. You know, and if you ask me why I went to the box, I couldn't even tell you. It probably wasn't even worth it, to be honest with you. But they utilize those tools to break you, essentially.
Yeah, so Kirsty, so it's safe to say you didn't feel like prison was rehabilitated for you?
Sorry about that. And that last part, prison is not about rehabilitation. When you think about rehabilitation, when you go to rehab, what are they doing? They're working on something that was once pretty good, and they want to get you back to that form. If you're an individual that lived the life that I have, there wasn't much to work back to. So that's why reform is important when we're talking about incarceration. We're talking about building up, we're talking about changing the mindsets, changing all of those things that go around. The prison isn't about rehabilitation. Prison is a giant emergency room where they give you the same pill. You go in there and say, my ankle's broken, my hand's broken, I have a cold, I have COVID, and guess what they give you? Time. That's all prison is. And they know that in time, like I always tell people, wherever I go, time is the real currency. That's why they give you time. Time is so important. That's the first thing they clock in when you come into this earth, and the last thing they clock when you leave. They could have took any rights they want, but they took your right to vote when you had that. Also, and what they mainly did with the time thing was taking your time is taking that connectivity. You know, so we have to establish that when people are sentenced to time, what are we really saying they're sentenced to?
Thank you. Kirsty, I'm gonna start with you, same thing, and then we'll get into your books. And I also want to leave some time for everybody to ask questions, because I do believe in conversation is how we learn. So I'm not pulling out my phone because I'm texting others interested. I'm doing a time check on myself.
And I'm actually at work,
Kirsty, I want to start with your view on prison being rehabilitated, and whether you think that it is. And then I want to go into what has it meant for you to become an author, kind of changing the trajectory of where you've been to where you are now.
Yeah, well, I was just saying the other day that they call it Department of Corrections, and I'm like, why do they call it that? There's nothing they do to correct. It's really like, I always say the criminal punishment system, because it's just pure punishment. And it's, I remember when I said to my mom, which my mom's here visiting from Oregon, it's my mom Sharon. This is her first time involved with Anita, so it's so nice to have your mom here watching this than watching you get sentenced. It's like the worst feeling ever, right? I mean, it's, whew, so I'm glad you're here with it. But yeah, it's, I told my mom when I first got there in the call, I said, this is just a trauma hospital for women. And so there's nothing about correcting, there's no rehabilitative, it's really more trauma compounded, one on top of the other. So I always say, yeah, I changed, I healed myself despite being in prison. And when I hear others say, prison saved my life, I think they say because you don't know what else to say, because you are changed, but it's despite being in prison. They have nothing to do to make you better. Every once in a while, there's a CO that's kind, the rest is just punitive. So
then take us to what does it now mean to you to be an author and have people looking to you and guiding them, you know, in this experience that you've had?
It feels a little full circle, because like I said, when I was in and the way they were treating me and the way I felt about myself were so different. And so, you know, I was actually in a drug program there, and I got kicked out a little bit before I was going to go home, and they said I was inauthentic. And it was the officer who was in charge of the program. She actually brought me in her office, and she knew I couldn't have children, and she said, Kirsty, thank God you couldn't have been a mother. She was like, you would have been a terrible mother. I bet you're a terrible daughter and a terrible sister. Yeah, so I had to do another year after that. So talk about like pulling yourself out of that alone. I was working in landscaping, so I planted flowers, and me and the flowers and the dragonflies, and God, I had deep, tearful conversations. And so the fact that I have a book now on authenticity is kind of cool. Hopefully she's reading it one day, because she's, you know, still in the prisons if it gets back in there. But it just had, all of that pain really forced me to go deep into who I am, like deep into who Kirsty is, like who's little Kirsty, and you know, who I was born to be. And so now that I think I went so far down that I don't have any secrets, and so I can just be me, be authentic, and guide others to do the same thing. So it feels freedom. Now I feel like I'm probably one of the most free people that I know, because I don't have any secrets.
Yeah, I remember a similar situation. I was called in, I had got to a new institution in the guard when you said that just now. He was the case manager. He called me into his office. I didn't even know he had access to my file, like in that moment. And he sat me in front of him and he was like, so, I read your file. Like, do you still have a relationship with your father who physically abused you? How did it feel to be sexually assaulted at 16? He was like, you sure you're through with all of that? And here I am. I think I had to be about 24 at the time. And I'm looking at this man and I'm like trying to not jump over the table on him because I had lost so much time already for fighting. But just thinking about the cruelty that you experience in that system. So when you said that, I was like, it took me, and I'm sure you have an incident, because the thing that is consistent, no matter, you were incarcerated in New York, Oregon, I was in Louisiana, Texas, I was everywhere, incarcerated everywhere too. Like there's a consistent line of cruelty, or cruel and unusual things that you experience while you're incarcerated. And Bree, I know going to see your father, and going to visitation and not even doing anything, you probably have multiple stories of like cruelty as well. My mom has her stories about coming to see us and the humiliation. So tell me, as someone who wasn't incarcerated, what's your one experience with cruelty? And then after that, I want to just give you guys an opportunity to share with the audience one thing that you wish that everybody could take away from your book, and then we'll go to questions.
Okay. For me, I would say the sound of the door that slams when you go to Angola. Like, I still remember how the door sound. And when you first get to Angola, you have to wear certain things. Like, if you go there and have on a tank top as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, it doesn't matter how old you are, they're going to tell you, oh, you can't wear that. Now, they don't let people know that before you get there because a lot of people, transportation back then was the bus. You catch the bus at the church, and that was probably your only visit to go see your parent or whoever your incarcerated loved one was back, some years ago. So we used to ride the bus, super excited to go see our families. And then it was, now that I understand what the rodeo is, it's so sad because I probably wouldn't have wanted to go if I understood it than I did now. But I was so excited because all I knew is that I could see my daddy outside of that jean outfit, whatever it is he used to wear. I think he used to be denim then, but in the cafeteria, we always used to have to go to main prison in Angola in the cafeteria. We kind of sit at the table and try to get to know each other for however long the visit was, and based on who your ride was, whether it was on a bus or a family member who had to leave at a certain time, then you only have a certain amount of time to talk to your father because it's always other people on the visit with you because I was a child, so everybody had their time when they want to talk to him. By the time we get into a deep conversation, that'll bring it's time for us to go. Like when you go to Angola, you can wear split toe slippers, sandals, just things that little girls wear. So if you go all the way to 3 hours up there to Angola and you don't have on the correct clothes, then you can't visit your family member. You have to sit up front and wait for the rest of the family to come back to the front, unless everybody want to leave, and they don't want to do that because it's the only opportunity to really see them. So that's really frustrating. And then what's also frustrating is the guard. Like, y'all in here with these men 24/7, and you mean to tell me you have to stand over people at the table, and then if a pencil drop, they running over there to make sure you're not doing something wrong. But I mean, this is your job to protect and make sure nobody is bringing nothing inside the prison. So if we're in the cafeteria eating, what do you think people doing? So why y'all standing over families, intimidating them? And then they had nothing for kids to do in Angola. When I was there, all you do is sit there and eat. And we would go with my daddy to the table, to figure out what type of food we wanted. And then the only good thing I liked about it is that he's able to tell, his friends who was working back there, like, oh, she want chips, or they want candy, So that made me feel good because that was the one thing I felt like my dad couldn't do for me. But it's really, really frustrating to have to just suck all of that up just because you want to see your parent, and you still could hear the person on the phone saying you have 1 minute left and the door slammed. And I think they do that purposely. They talk to you crazy and everything. The people are crazy rednecks in Louisiana, like upstate. Y'all know that. They crazy. You can't say the wrong thing. They had a lady in front of me probably 3 years ago. I just went back for the first time to visit someone in there, and I always say I'll never go back. because if my daddy was released, now I'm never going back there, but I ended up going back because I was in the work now. Now I'm doing this work, and, you know, I wanted to go back on the other side to, you know, visit the person we was going to see and kind of walk back, you know, and think about the things that I experienced. And I tell you, when I walked in there, I regretted it the moment I went back there, because when I went back there and that door slammed, I felt like I wasn't going to be able to get out. And it was the same thing, Gar standing over the table, like, let these people family talk. And they told the pregnant lady, you have to go through the machine. After she literally told them she was expecting, they didn't care. They could see her stomach was this big. They told her she had to have an ultrasound paper from her doctor showing that she was pregnant in order for her to not walk through the machine that could have possibly harmed her baby. So they do a lot of things that they don't care about, because they, like, you want to see a family member or you don't. So I think that was one of my experiences. And as far as my book, in my own words, it's a book that I think anyone could read. I wrote a book because I used to love to read books, but I don't feel like I have the time no more. So I love to read, but I like to read short books. I do Audible, I do Kindle, right? So I have a lot of friends who say they want to buy my book. So when I wrote my book, I thought about the people who have shared experiences and who have kids and who have busy lives and don't have time to read 500 pages. So I wrote a short book. And in my book, I talk about my story, and I also talk about strategies and things to do to help people embrace barriers and overcome obstacles. Because sometimes things are going to constantly happen in your life, but you might not get over it, but you can learn to embrace it so you can keep going. And I'm kind of like living my own book right now, because I wrote this book prior to having kids. And right after I wrote the book, and the first time I sold it, I think I sold over 500 copies in less than a few weeks to a month. And I couldn't believe it, that so many people wanted to read my story. It's something that I thought was a strategy to teach them to get through things. And last year, I birthed twins, a son and a seer. At 24 weeks, there was 1 pound 4 ounces and 1 pound 11 ounces. A seer stayed in the NICU for 148 days at Children's, and the son passed away after 8 days. And so now I'm teaching myself. Every day I wake up, I literally look in the mirror like, you got this, Bree. And so the book cover, it come back full circle, because on my book cover, I'm in the mirror. Don't tell me why I was in the mirror, because this is a few years ago, but it's just coming back full circle, teaching myself how to embrace barriers in my own words, because I have to face that. It's not something I'm going to get over. It is, you know, it's not overcoming an obstacle. It's a barrier that I have to embrace every day, because Monday through Wednesday, I might feel good, but here come Friday, I look at a seer, he look like his twin sister. That triggered me, you know. So just having to be a new mom, a grieving mom, you know, being in the hospital, a new fiance, a family member, and in my workspace, I think it's really difficult sometimes, but because I have community and have a supportive family system, that keeps me going, and I don't feel like I need to do the work. I feel like every day I get up now, the work I do with my organization, I feel like I want to do it, so I could teach as many young women and girls how to embrace barriers and overcome their obstacles, and tell a story, even if it's telling it to yourself, but just being real with yourself on who you are and your experiences and accepting it. And I think when I started accepting the things that I experienced throughout my life, I'm able to keep embracing these barriers and staying on the stage after experiencing something like that that's currently, you know, traumatic to me. So,
Thank you, Bree. Kirsty, one thing you want the people in this room to take away from your book?
Well, my book is 33 short chapters about my life in very vulnerable transparency, looking at my emotions and different experiences that led me to the next thing. And so at the end of every chapter, I ask the reader questions. So it's kind of a reflective book. And then in the back, there's lines for them to write, because I believe writing, the act of pen to paper, really makes such a big difference. And like Andre said, you know, a lot of people are in mental prison before you get to physical prison. So my goal is to touch people, even those that have never been incarcerated, to get them to delve into their hearts, their, like, the light and the dark part of them, and like love all of it, embrace all of it, and just understand that that's who they are. So if that's something that you want to do, that Perfectly Flawed is really good for that.
Thank you. And after Andre tells us the one thing, we're going to open it up for questions.
I think the one thing that my book, I want to put it about my book is really discharge planning. I wanted to make sure that individuals that are going to be released had the opportunity to take a huge role in their own discharge planning. And I was hoping that those that read the book that haven't been incarcerated understand that they may need to do some discharge planning from the situations that they're in. So this is situational support for every situation. I try to give as many tools and things that I've done just to help individuals out. So, just letting them know how to network, because network is truly network.
I forgot I wanted to add in my book, what you can take away is the family structure. I show real pictures of my family and some things that I experienced in my book, and it's also a coping mechanism. So if I say something in my book that I feel like going to trigger you, you could take a moment and have pages that you can write about it. You could, whatever you want to do, you can write about it, you can say it out loud to yourself, you could connect with a therapist for mental health resources. So I have resources in the book that you can connect with based on what I said that triggers you as well. So it's also a book for like coping mechanisms, because a lot of books that I've read don't have a lot of books, and I'm a visual learner, I like to see too. So I have a lot of books about my family and just things that I've overcame and embraced in my life.
Thank you. Thank y'all so much for being honest and transparent. Really appreciate talking to y'all today. We can open up for any questions. So does anyone have any questions? You want microphone?
Oh, no, I can project. I'm sorry, I forget your last name. Mr. Andre, you said that you wish there was more situational support. What kind of situational support do you think is needed?
Well, that's part of, like my current job right now, I actually just got hired last month, so I'm developing a program called the Restore Program. So we're going to be doing a lot of the stuff that I talked about in my books and in my head in this program and designing it, helping people that have anywhere from 20 days to 270 days left. We'll actually be doing a lot of the reentry services and trainings from the inside, and then they'll have a direct continuing of support, because the same case managers will also be the same case managers when they come home. And so we're already going to be working on the individual planning and things like that. But what I wanted to make sure is that individuals, like everybody always here, you do the crime, you do the time, which is totally false. Because as you can see, Bree was doing that time as well. So when I talk about support and what that looks like, one of the main things that I said in the interview is that I don't want to just help that individual that is incarcerated. I need to know who they want to be. Because if we can empower them with showing them that they can still be supportive, they can still be who they are, you're not just a number, then we can hope to kind of make those pushes, and get them more confident, and they'll be able to execute better. So I look more into family support, what that looks like. Even with, there's over 1 million fathers incarcerated. You guys aware of that? And there's more children of incarcerated parents than people incarcerated. So doing re-entry without doing family bonding and any of those other things is asinine. We all are trying to get back to our families, yet there is not one space where they're like, we're going to do family bonding, or we're going to talk about family, even in some of the major re-entry programs you see now. So, just kind of trying to get innovative with all of that support, and, even those that have never been hired for a job, getting them to just be job ready and work ready. And, one of the things that I did in New York was I was actually able to use Zoom, the same Zoom they use to sentence people. I had a jail actually allow me to do programming through the Zoom, and I brought an employer on Zoom that interviewed individuals before they even came home. So imagine coming home to a job that you already know. So those are the types of things that I'm talking about, just overall holistic support, and just especially with the mental, because when you address the mental, you can address all of the other things. And if you know anything about incarceration, the drug use and all of those other things, and how they play a major role.
You should probably connect with Kirsty after at the organization that we work at together. She's a reentry support specialist. She goes into prison 18 months before release, assess the needs, connect them with life coaches after the fact. So I probably should do a little talk after. Next, yeah.
So, back to the cruelty issue. What can we do on
that would eliminate cruelty in prisons, besides getting rid of some of our state lawmakers that we all like.
You could eliminate jail. I don't think anything. Because the issue is what is always, what you'll find as a recurrent issue, no matter what the situation is accountability. We cannot have the prison system investigating themselves and then finding themselves not guilty. It's just stupid, you know, and so that's what you're finding. Policy-wise, I honestly don't know what would realistically work, because especially when it comes down to the prisoners, I've noticed that.
I'm not
No. We're going to switch it over to Syrita. Syrita, what policy do you think?
So I mean, honestly, there are multiple, so the United States as a whole does not normally look to other countries for things because we know it all. That's the Western mindset, right? But there are places that do rehabilitation really well inside a criminal legal system or whatever. So the biggest one of the biggest that come up initially, places like Germany or Amsterdam. You take a country like Germany, who had probably the second most atrocities that had been handed down to a group of people, and now they went from one of the most flawed against human beings to like a model for human services. There are ways in which prisons or jails are set up in those countries that don't have the same type of punitive interactions that we have here. So no matter what crime is committed in Amsterdam, for instance, the sentence is 25 years. That's the longest amount of time a person can be given. They live in apartment-style housing. They don't live in warehouses. They don't live in cages that bring out cruelty from individuals upon someone that they consider less than human. These individuals leave out and they go to work every single day. And they come back in, they cook, they are embedded in society in a way that we don't even know that they're incarcerated. So when you talk about specific policy initiatives, it starts with how we house people, how we treat people while they're housed. So the systems that are created currently are set up to dehumanize people. So if you are writing policy or legislation, they have to be based in humanity first. So you can start with things like outlawing language. I tell people a lot when I first was released from prison, I did almost 10 years. I didn't respond to my first name because I hadn't heard Syrita in over 10 years. So when someone would say Syrita, it took me a while to catch back up to, hey, they're talking about you. So when we use numbers or we use terms to even talk about people, it strips away the humanity. We could start with small policy wins about calling people by their name while they're incarcerated, referring to people as human beings and not convicts and felons and inmates and all of the other things that you talk about, because what that allows is for other human beings to look at people as subhuman and treat them as such. So there are small things that can build morale and change how you view individuals. But if you're going back to like a structural legislative policy that would not allow people to be mean, realistically, kids bully, it's gonna happen. But it's about shifting the power dynamic and creating policies that equal the playing field as it relates. You shouldn't have someone with absolute power governing someone who's powerless, because it's always gonna be an issue.
I read about prisons in Norway, and I was so impressed because it looked like, the cells were like hotel rooms, and I thought that we need to start there. We need to treat people with dignity, no matter. Having your freedom stripped is enough, but you need to be able to, be kept warm temperature-wise, and have a mattress and a blanket. Those are basic human needs.
But if the goal is rehabilitation, if that's the goal, we know this is not the goal of this system. If the goal is rehabilitation, how do you teach people to be their best selves? And all of the countries that we just talked about have the lowest recidivism rate. That's always a term that we throw out and say, how do we impact recidivism? How do we take recidivism down? There are very profound examples across the country of how we can do that, but the United States doesn't necessarily.
Would you say that how prisons are run in Europe are reflective of the larger society in terms of caring for people? Look at the health system in Europe, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more than just, we often talk about how the country was started, and if you think about things in a historical context, the whole country was started in Philadelphia. It was Benjamin Franklin and a few of his friends. They are responsible for creating the oldest hospital in this country, the oldest prison in this country, and one of the oldest educational institutions in this country. And at that particular time, women couldn't go to school, women couldn't do anything, Black people couldn't do anything. It was strictly constructed for those individuals in that room. And when you're moving from that space, you can't fix that. You have to recreate an inclusive environment that starts with caring for all of your people.
Could you guys speak a little bit to how you balance sharing your stories and helping others with like revisiting the trauma that you had, and like how do you balance that? How do you continue to write about these experiences and talk about them without constantly like being in that space?
Well, I'm not good with that, so I'll look at me.
You know, it's funny because it seems like that's all of who I am now. Like one's not separate from the other. It's how I move around in the world because, you know, like we just talked about the punishment, there's so much that needs to be done. And there's so much that people don't really know. And so I'm always talking about what really goes on in ways that we can change and bridge to other communities, bridge to people that have, you know, that have not been impacted by incarceration. So I think just for quiet time for myself in the morning, you know, I have a routine that I still write in the morning just to, you know, ground myself, and I go for a run, and that's my quiet time, and then it's just off and running. But I think the trauma part, you have to be careful, especially in the beginning, to make sure you have worked through the pain and you know, whether it's guilt and shame, so that when you're talking about it, you're not exposing more than you want to, or you're not being, you know, others aren't taking advantage of your story. I want to make sure I'm telling my story rather than other people telling my story, and I want to be the one that says yes or no if I want to talk about it or not. And that takes a little bit of time because you want to talk about it because you want others to understand, but then you have to make sure that you put yourself first to make sure that you're healing enough. And there is such a thing as a vulnerability hangover. I think sometimes the next day I'm like, dang, tired, you know, but I think that's what it is, you know, so it's good to acknowledge that too.
So honestly, therapy, like I was joking, do a lot of therapy and being open to doing therapy. But then every time you're able to like move somebody into success, because we do like a lot of direct service work, it often makes it feel like it's a win for all of the losses that you're taking. So really being invested in getting as many people to success and whatever they see that for themselves. Because, you know, you start from a deficit as it is. So trying to be involved in as much work that allows people to walk into who they are, I think balance it a little. I know we have 1 minute, but the good thing is that Andre and Kirsty and Bree are here. They have their books. They'll be signing books if you all purchase them. And we can ask the rest of the questions, but I know we have one more, and I saw your hand up for a while. So you'll be the last question.
Okay, so to her question about what we do to change things, one of the things I think, because I agree with what you've said up here, in small wins, start that way, but one of the things that has to happen is the dialogue amongst the American public has to shift. Because if you listen to politicians who develop policy and adopt it and enforce it, it's all, I'm going to be hard on crime. we can all agree in general, but when you get down to the particulars, that's where it gets really hairy and scary. And the public has to realize that not everybody is, I don't know how they classify them, the worst of the worst criminals. You know what I'm saying? A plan has to be multi-tiered because there are different levels of, problems and people's ability to be rehabilitated. But the dialogue in the public, because it takes money to develop these programs, to build these institutions that can help people, and it comes through the politics when they're approving the budgets. So if people just talk in general, like, I like this person because they're tough on crime and we're going to stop crime, that's so general. What does that mean? What does it really mean? What is the work that needs to happen? And in order to create those systems that she's referred to in the other countries, you have to get the public buy-in because they're the ones who put the people in office, and the people in office are reluctant to do things because their constituents don't want to do that because they feel like we're catering to criminals.
But we have to have some real conversations about race for that. So like if you historically go back to it, it's a narrative that was created after slavery ended so we could continue. The 13th Amendment says that the only time that slavery is legal is when someone is incarcerated. To take slavery off the ballot last year, it was on the ballot. We could vote, and this state chose not to pass it. So when we talk about those things, yes, the tough on crime, those conversations, all of that, you're absolutely 100% spot on, but it's all rooted in race. And until we can talk about European countries treating other Europeans fairly because they haven't enslaved one another. They don't have that history with the 400 years of slavery and oppression that we have. So the reason why it seems as if people are like tough on crime, there are very specific things that you can go back to in the history of this country where those talking points originated. I went to the museum this week. I spent the last week in Montgomery. And something that was the most profound thing to me was there was an application to fill out to become a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I took a picture of it in my phone. The third point on it, the third thing, it asks you, do you believe that parents should have a right over their children's education and what their children learn? That's the conversation in the country right now today. That was the third question on the application to become a member of the Ku Klux Klan. So until we really have a conversation around race, we talk about historical facts about what's going on, we're going to continue to have these same conversations and elect these same individuals because we are not looking to the past in any way to guide us.
And can I just point out too, when you say race, think of the Native Americans, and I say this from my own personal experience of how the great-granddaughter of a tribe here in central Louisiana. I mean, race, it wasn't just black and white, it's black and white and red, and let's be honest, anybody who's different these days are looked down on, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely right, but there was a specific group of individuals that were enslaved for 400 years. And that is where we have to go. I'm Native descent as well. The way we treat a Native American in this country is atrocious as well.
I always refer to Native Americans as a silent group because other groups have been vocal. You know, we had the civil rights movement in the 60s, and you see the Latino populations coming forward and finding their voice. Native Americans have been related to the scene, but it's really about humanity and how people act towards one another when you get down to
They've been exterminated.
Yes.
But thank y'all. Thank you.